Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive here on the show.
Yes, hello.
Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into work-life balance.
Very relevant.
Oh, so relevant, and something that I think we all struggle with from time to time.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have two sources today that we're going to be kind of jumping back and forth between.
Sounds good.
The first one is called Balancing Work and Personal Life, like an expert.
Okay.
And the second one is called Work Life. And I think these two sources kind of complement each other really nicely because balancing work and personal life like an expert is a little bit more practical.
Good.
It gives you, tips and things like that, whereas work life is a little bit more philosophical and kind of dives into the bigger picture a little bit more.
I like that.
So I think you're going to find this deep dive really insightful, and hopefully you'll walk away with some nuggets, some real nuggets that you can apply to your own life, because I know I certainly did.
Yeah, no, me too.
One of the things that I found really interesting from the get-go, and this is from Balancing Work and Personal Life like an expert, is that the term work-life balance actually originated in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Didn't know that. Yeah.
I know, I had no idea, and I thought that was really interesting because I think it speaks to how our relationship with work has really evolved over time,
Absolutely.
Like back then it was more of a novel concept, like, oh, we need to balance our work with our life.
Right.
But now it's like this essential, ingredient for well-being.
Totally. And I think that's where work life really picks up on this idea that it's not just about, dividing your time equally between work and personal life.
Right.
It's about finding a way to integrate them in a way that feels harmonious and fulfilling.
That's a great point, and I think that's something that both sources really emphasize, is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to work-life balance. It's really about finding what works for you based on your own individual circumstances, your priorities, your values, your goals, all of that good stuff.
And then your life stage, right?
Oh, absolutely, your life stage. Like someone who's just starting out in their career is going to have very different needs and priorities than, someone who's maybe in a more established phase of their career or even approaching retirement.
Exactly.
So I think that's something really important to keep in mind as we dive into some of these strategies and tips, is that you really need to tailor it to your own unique situation.
I agree. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that the challenges we face today are, kind of unique to our current work culture, right?
Right.
Like balancing work and personal life, like an expert talks about, the rise of technology
Right.
and how that's kind of blurred the lines between work and personal life.
Oh my, totally.
We're constantly connected, constantly reachable.
It's like you can never really switch off.
Exactly. And that can make it really difficult to create those boundaries and protect our personal time.
And then, work life also points out that there's this kind of pervasive hustle culture now.
Yeah.
Where we're constantly bombarded with messages that we need to be doing more, achieving more, striving for more. It's like, when do we get to just be?
Right. Right.
When do we get to just relax and recharge?
It's almost like we've glorified busyness.
It's true. It's like a badge of honor to be like, oh, I'm so busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's something we really need to challenge.
I agree.
But okay, so we've talked about some of the challenges, but before we get into like the nitty-gritty of how to actually achieve work-life balance, I'm curious, what's the big deal anyway? Like, why does this even matter?
Right.
Why should we care about finding this balance?
Well, I think work life does a really good job of outlining the benefits.
Okay.
And it's not just about feeling less stressed, Although that's definitely a huge plus.
Oh yeah, I'll take less stress any day.
Right. But we're also talking about increased energy, better sleep, improved productivity at work, stronger relationships, even physical health benefits, like a reduced risk of heart disease.
Wow. So it's not just about feeling good, it's about being healthy.
Exactly. It's about taking care of ourselves holistically.
That's amazing.
And I think when you frame it that way, it becomes a lot harder to ignore.
That's a great point. Like, who wouldn't want all of those things? Sign me up.
Right.
But I think sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we lose sight of the bigger picture,
Absolutely.
Like we forget why we're even doing all of this in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important to regularly check in with ourselves and ask, is this working for me?
Right.
Am I feeling balanced? Am I feeling fulfilled?
That's such a great question. And I think it's something we're going to dive into a little bit deeper as we continue this deep dive.
Sounds good.
But for now, I want to hear from you. What is one benefit of work-life balance that really resonates with you personally?
That's a great question. For me, it's the productivity piece. Like, it might seem counterintuitive, but when I create space for things I enjoy outside of work, I actually come back to work feeling more focused and energized.
Totally. It's like you're sharpening the saw.
Exactly.
Like you need to take that time to recharge so that you can be your best self when you're working.
Right.
And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, the idea that taking time for yourself can actually make you better at your job.
Right. It's like we've been conditioned to believe that being busy equals being productive.
Totally. And it's so not true.
It's so not true.
But okay, so we've talked about the benefits, we've talked about some of the challenges. So let's get into some actual strategies.
Do it.
Like how can we actually start to create more balance in our lives? And one of the things that balancing work and personal life, like an expert, really emphasizes is the importance of setting clear priorities.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, it sounds simple, but it's something that I've personally struggled with in the past, like figuring out what actually matters most to me.
Right, right.
And then once you know what your priorities are, actually making decisions that align with those priorities.
Totally. And I think that's where work life adds a really interesting layer by talking about the concept of protecting your free spaces.
Okay, I like that. Tell me more about that.
So it's basically the idea that you need to actively defend your time and energy from the encroachment of work.
Oh, I love that.
It's not enough to just, schedule time for personal activities.
Right.
You have to be willing to say no to things that threaten that time.
That's so powerful. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Like, I used to feel so obligated to say yes to every request, even if it meant sacrificing my personal time, my well-being, my sanity.
Right. I think it's easy to fall into that trap, especially in a work culture that often rewards busyness and overwork.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
But I finally realized that saying no to some things actually allowed me to say yes to the things that truly mattered.
That's such a good point.
Like spending quality time with my family, pursuing creative projects that bring me joy, taking care of my health.
Yeah, it's about being intentional with your time and energy.
Exactly.
And making choices that align with your values and priorities.
Yes, and I think that's a perfect place to kind of pause for now and pick up on this conversation in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
So we'll see you back here soon.
See you then. So we've talked about the benefits of work-life balance.
We have, and some of the challenges that can make it hard to actually achieve, in our modern world.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, like, what happens when we don't prioritize this balance? Like, are there actual consequences beyond just, feeling a bit frazzled?
Yeah, that's an important question, and both sources really dive into this.
Okay, good, because I know, like, for me, sometimes I need that extra push,
Yeah.
Like, I need to understand the real implications before I'm like, okay, fine, I'll actually make a change.
Absolutely. And I think work life in particular does a great job of outlining the risks associated with chronic work-life imbalance.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, first and foremost, they talk about burnout,
Oh, burnout.
which I'm sure we're all familiar with.
Yeah, I've definitely had my moments.
Right. And they go beyond just the emotional toll, highlighting the physical health implications.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, did you know that chronic work-life imbalance can increase your risk of developing heart disease?
Wow, we did not know that.
Yeah. Anxiety disorders, depression, even insomnia.
So this is serious stuff.
It's serious stuff.
All right.
And it's easy to dismiss work-life balance as a soft issue, but the research really paints a different picture.
That's a great point.
It's about protecting our long-term health and well-being.
Right. It's not just about being a little bit more relaxed or a little bit more productive. It's about our overall well-being.
Exactly. And the impact extends beyond our individual health as well. Both sources emphasize the strain that imbalance can put on our relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like with your partner, your family, your friends.
Precisely, when we're constantly prioritizing work, those personal connections can suffer.
Right, because you're not really present,
Exactly. And work life points out that this can lead to feelings of resentment, isolation, even conflict.
Oh, yeah. If you're always the one canceling plans or working late, that's bound to cause some tension.
Absolutely. And that lack of social support can further exacerbate those negative health outcomes that we were talking about.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It really is.
So achieving work-life balance isn't just about personal happiness. It's about protecting our health and our relationships.
It's about creating a life that feels sustainable and fulfilling in the long run.
I love that.
So where do we begin? I think both sources offer some practical strategies for finding that balance. And one of the things that balancing work and personal life, like an expert suggests, is starting by understanding your own personal energy patterns.
Oh, right. You mentioned that in the first part, and I've been thinking about it, Like, when am I actually most productive?
Exactly. And the idea is that we all have different times of day when we're most energized and focused.
Right. Some people are morning people, some people are night owls.
Exactly. And a key strategy for achieving work-life balance is to align your schedule with your natural energy flows.
Oh, that's so smart. Like, why am I forcing myself to do creative work at 8 p.m. if I'm totally brain dead by then?
Right. If you know you're most focused in the mornings, block off that time for your most demanding tasks and reserve the less demanding stuff for your less productive period.
That makes total sense. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And work life adds to this by emphasizing the importance of managing expectations.
Okay, expectations. In what sense?
Well, both at work and at home, it's about setting realistic deadlines, delegating tasks when appropriate, and being upfront about your capacity.
Oh, so like communicating your limits.
Exactly, both to your boss, your colleagues, and your family.
That's so important. And I think it can be really hard, Like,
Yeah.
I hate saying no, but I'm realizing that it's essential for protecting my time and energy.
I agree, and it gets easier with practice.
And work life also talks about the importance of self-reflection in this process, like taking the time to really evaluate how things are going.
Yeah, like, are you feeling overwhelmed, resentful? Are you feeling energized and joyful?
Those are great questions.
And they offer a really thought-provoking question to guide that reflection. How can you turn your work into a source of energy instead of draining it?
Ooh, that is a good one.
It challenges us to think about our work in a different way.
Yeah, instead of viewing it as something we have to endure, it's about finding ways to make it more meaningful and engaging.
Right, and that might involve taking on new challenges, seeking out opportunities for growth, or even just shifting your perspective on the work you're already doing.
It's about finding that spark,
Mm.
that passion.
Exactly. And balancing work and personal life like an expert suggests that cultivating passions outside of work can actually enhance your professional life.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, those outside passions can help you develop new skills, expand your network, and just bring fresh perspectives to your work.
So it's like they feed each other.
Exactly. It's a symbiotic relationship.
I love that.
And they also emphasize the importance of self-care.
Oh, self-care. Yes, we have to talk about self-care.
It's essential.
But, I think a lot of people get hung up on this idea like, what does self-care even mean?
Right. It can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like this big, elaborate thing.
Absolutely not. It can be as simple as taking 5 minutes to stretch or meditate or going for a walk in nature.
It's about doing something that nourishes you, that fills your cup.
Exactly. And work life adds to this by emphasizing the importance of mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Tell me more.
It's about being present in each moment.
Okay.
Whether you're working, spending time with loved ones, or just enjoying a quiet moment to yourself.
I like that because I think it's so easy to get caught up in our to-do lists and, just constantly thinking about the next thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But mindfulness helps us appreciate the present moment and just kind of let go of that stress.
Exactly. And it can also help us identify when we're starting to feel overwhelmed or out of balance, so we can make adjustments before we reach a breaking point.
That's so key. It's about being proactive.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that idea of self-awareness, like tuning into our bodies and our emotions and understanding what we need.
I think that's a perfect place to transition into the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I'm excited to explore even more strategies and insights in part 3.
Me too.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into work-life balance.
And I feel like we've already uncovered so many gems.
I know, right? Like, from the science behind burnout to the importance of setting boundaries and managing our energy, it's been a wild ride.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to see where we go in this last part.
Me too. And, one of the things that both balancing work and personal life, like an expert and work life, emphasize is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to this whole work-life balance thing.
Right. Like what works for me might not work for you, and vice versa.
Exactly. And even what worked for you a year ago might not work for you today.
Oh, that's so true. Like our needs and priorities change over time.
We really do. And I think work life does a great job of explaining how our roles and responsibilities evolve throughout different life stages and how that impacts our approach to balance.
Yeah, like someone in their 20s just starting their career might have a very different definition of balance than someone in their 40s with a family.
Totally. And even within those life stages, like think about all the different work environments out there.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like someone working in a fast-paced startup might have more flexibility in their schedule, but also face pressure to always be on.
Right. Whereas someone in a more traditional corporate setting might have more predictable hours, but less autonomy over their workload.
It's all about recognizing your own unique circumstances and figuring out what works best for you in that context.
So, if there's no magic formula, where do we even begin?
Well, balancing work and personal life, like an expert, suggests starting small.
Okay, I like that because I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed, like we need to make these huge, drastic changes all at once.
Right, but they emphasize that it's much more sustainable to focus on making gradual changes over time.
So instead of trying to overhaul your entire life overnight, maybe you start by setting a consistent sleep schedule
Or dedicating 30 minutes each day to
or
exercise.
setting clearer boundaries around work emails after hours.
Exactly. It's about building healthy habits one step at a time.
And I think that's something work-life really supports as well. The idea of creating a phased action plan, like tackling one area of your life at a time.
So maybe this week you focus on improving your sleep hygiene, and next week you focus on setting better boundaries at work.
And as you experience those positive effects, you'll be more motivated to keep going.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
And, it's important to remember that this is a journey, not a destination.
Oh, absolutely. There will be setbacks, there will be challenges, but that's okay.
Both sources really encourage us to embrace those challenges as opportunities for learning and growth.
Like, don't be afraid to experiment with different strategies, to try new things, to adjust your approach as needed.
And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Yes, such a good point. Whether it's from a therapist, a coach, a mentor, a supportive friend, we don't have to do this alone.
And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question from Work Life.
Okay, I'm ready.
They ask, what does success look like to you, both in your professional life and your personal life?
Wow, that's a big one.
It is, but I think it's such an important question to reflect on.
It challenges us to define our own version of success rather than conforming to someone else's expectations.
Exactly. And I think when we have a clear vision of what we're striving for, it makes it so much easier to make choices that align with that vision.
It gives us direction and purpose.
It does. And it reminds us that work-life balance is not about achieving some perfect state of equilibrium, but rather about creating a life that feels authentic and fulfilling to us.
So as we close out this deep dive, take some time to reflect on that question. What does a truly balanced and fulfilling life look like to you?
And what small steps can you take today to move closer to that vision?
We've given you a toolbox full of strategies and insights.
And now it's up to you to put them into practice.
Create a life that brings you joy, purpose, and a deep sense of balance.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of exploration.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you back here next time on The Deep Dive.